So, this will be a bit of a different video. I am recording to you from my very messy office space right now. This is a matter that is so serious that I feel it's kind of urgent to talk about. I am not seeing anyone else really covering this at the extent that I would want it to be covered. So, I gotta kind of do it myself then, right? I'm usually a very happy person. I'm usually, I can crack a joke here and there and so on. I don't feel it's appropriate to do that in this video. It's a kind of a serious topic. And even though I love history and history makes me happy, sometimes history will also be a very delicate matter and it will also be very sad. And it's not always appropriate to crack jokes when you're talking about very serious topics. So it is what it is. The background story to why I'm making this video is because I quite frankly got very bothered by seeing some sellers trying to sell inappropriate items and mark them as Scandinavian traditional items, which they are not, which I will go into in the video, why it's widely inappropriate to be selling these items in the way that they're being sold and marketed. So what I did then was that I made a reel on Instagram. Here it is. I have also seen weird reels on Instagram where people claim one or the other, like that Santa is some kind of a mushroom and that Vikings always gave away kittens when they got married, and stuff that is just made up that there's no proof of. And I understand that that can make people not believe me as well when I put up a reel about history and so on. That is also why I think it's very important that you guys know that all of my sources will be in the description below, so that you guys can also take a read for yourself if this topic interests you. I would love nothing else than to just talk about ancient history, because that is really what makes me happy. But unfortunately, with the love and the knowledge of ancient history, especially when it comes to Nordic history, there comes also a responsibility, in my opinion. And believe me, I am also very fed up with people who try to paint out others that they don't know as something they are not. This video is not that. I will not be calling out anyone personally. This is about a wide range of people. And this is not about what I think their personal beliefs are. This is about that I find it very inappropriate the way that they are acting in order to get money. So let's get into it. And also, if you're new here, hello, I am the Moose Lady. I have a bachelor within cultural heritage studies and I have a bachelor's in archaeology in Sweden, and I'm currently working towards my master's. I also work within the museum world of Sweden, so those are my credentials talking about this, so you know. Before going into the whole item and why it's inappropriate and so, we need to decipher a couple of words here, because these words are being used over and over again when marketing these things. So the first word is tradition. What does tradition mean? The word tradition means a belief or conviction that has been passed from generation to generation over a long amount of time, and that this so to say belief, the tradition, that it is being repeated over and over again in a similar fashion throughout the generations. And the word tradition comes from the Latin word traditio, and that means it means the transaction of private property to the next generation. Then we have two other words that I want to talk about, and the first word is pagan. Pagan could also be heathen. It depends on which part of the world you are in and what language tradition that is there. Sometimes the word is pagan and sometimes the word is heathen, but it means basically the same thing. It all matters where you come from. But for simplicity's sake, I will use the word pagan in this example. And in a historical context, this would be a people or community that is observing a polytheistic religion or conviction, like for example the ancient Romans, the ancient Greeks, ancient Nordics. And it could also be, the worship of the earth, like neo-pagans, the worship of nature. And it also means a person that does not belong in the main categorized religions, like being a Christian, being a Jewish, being a Muslim, you know, the bigger religions. And now I want to talk about the word ancient. So the word ancient usually means the time before around the year 500 AD. Ancient usually refers to a very far away historical past. It's a society that we can't relate to or understand anymore, basically. It doesn't need to be a society, it can be ancient rocks, ancient leavings, ancient, you know, structures, whatever. But ancient means very, very old. So those three words I want you to keep in mind: ancient, tradition, and pagan. Keep the meanings of these three words close to you while going into this video. And I want to talk also a bit about symbolism, historical symbolism, and what is ancient and what is not ancient, and how this thing has been so mixed up in some examples that there are some things that people claim are ancient that is absolutely not ancient at all. If we take runes, for example, runes have a history in ancient Scandinavia. The S rune in Younger Futhark, it looks like this. In a rune carving, in a rune scripture, whatever, obviously this is a rune, this is an S sound. If you take the Younger S Futhark rune and you put it together with another S and you tilt them a little bit, then we get a completely other meaning to it. And if we can do it again with the Elder Futhark O, and we put wings on it, and all of a sudden it goes from just a rune that has history and ancient meanings and, you know, context, and we put some wings on it, and all of a sudden it means something else. What we can agree to is that these examples I brought up right now, they existed in the ancient world. There is proof that they existed in the ancient world, but they have been redesigned a little bit and repurposed a little bit if you put them in a certain type of way, right? And then we have the absolute bottom of the barrel of things, and that is the things that are not even ancient, that has not been, so to say, redesigned or repurposed at all, but they are simply inspired by ancient worlds, and but they are modern. A big example of this is the Roman salute. Very simply put, the Roman salute, that is what the Nazis did and what the fascists in Italy did. Like when you hire your hand. I'm not going to show you. And it was inspired by a painting made during the 1700s. And if I'm not mistaken, this painting can be found at the Louvre in Paris today. It is a very classical painting where the Roman salute is being shown. But there are no ancient records of the Roman salute being used in ancient Rome at all. With that in mind, it rightfully has taken a life of its own, and it doesn't, like, you don't think about a French painting when you see someone do that hand motion, right? And with this in mind, let's talk about Julleuchter, Yule lanterns, because they are more like the Roman salute than they are like any usage of runes ever. First things first, this video is not about pointing fingers towards anyone that has bought these lanterns in ignorance, because they didn't know. Sometimes I don't think that it's on the buyer to look into every single thing that they buy. You should be able to trust whoever is selling something to you in good faith, especially when it comes with words such as pagan, tradition, and ancient. Then you should be able to feel a bit of trust as a customer. I don't think it's on the customer to do the research of the product that someone else is selling, okay? And I'm not pointing fingers towards any ignorant sellers that have seen something online that, oh, this is pretty, and then they have copied it, like they have gone into someone else's shop, and then they have copied it from someone else that is selling them, and they have copied their description of them and so on, and the meaning. Is it lazy to just copy someone else that is selling something? Yeah, it is, but it's also not made with bad intent then. I will, however, and I think I am within my right to point a big finger at the sellers who provenly know about the history of these items, still chooses to ignore people that inform them that, hey, this is offensive, this is not ancient anything, there is no history to this, it's bad, please look into it, and they just block you. That's their response because they want to make money. Those people I will point a finger at. You can't make something have a history it doesn't have. You can't make something into an ancient pagan tradition just because you want it to be. You are fooling your customers. You are making a big joke out of paganism and history and the people who have suffered for these lanterns. And you are muddying the usage of historical items because, as I am sure that many know, many people do not understand why runes are not only used by racists or Nazis or fascists. And I don't want to give these people leeway anymore. You can block me, okay? You can block me. You can block all of the other people talking to you about these things. You cannot deny the origin of these lamps forever. And that is also why I'm making the video, because people need to know. People need to know this. Again, sources in the description. I don't want this to turn into he said, she said, they said. This is not my story. This is just history, okay? Plain and simple. For those who don't know much about European history, we need to talk about the other man in power during the 1930s, 1940s in Germany. His name also started with an H, and he also had a crappy mustache. His name was Heinrich Himmler. So Himmler, he was the boss over the Schutzstaffel, what we know is SS. The runes we looked at in the beginning of the video. That word basically translates to something along the lines of the protection division. Their main task was to kind of police each other within the party, so to say. But then it grew into that they were the ones to protect the German Empire against its enemies. So Himmler actually had the previous chief of this group assassinated. That shows you kind of what type of a guy he was. So you have to understand what type of power this man had in his time and what power the SS and every person he had underneath him, they had control over the secret service in Germany. They turned into the highest instance of the law, even in countries that they occupied, not just in Germany, but countries that they occupied as well. They turned into the absolute power, the law. And on the orders of Hitler, Himmler and his SS staff were put in absolute control over the concentration camps. So Himmler, he is a minister in his country. He is the head of the police. And he was set the task after looking after the concentration camps. This man was in absolute power. Additionally, on top of all of this, he had some super weird hard-on for Scandinavian, Nordic, Germanic mythology and history. Himmler was super into neo-paganism and cult stuff, and he used this special hobby or interest for him, and he mixed that into his very racist worldview. I can't make it clear like how important it is to point out how much power this man had, and he also had this interest in Nordic history, mythology, occult stuff, and so on. Because these elements of power and his interests and his worldview, he didn't shy away from creating his own traditions. In this point in time, in this society, what he said, that is what goes. If he says, this is ancient, this is pagan, this is like tradition, then it became. No one needed proof, because he was in ultimate power. No one asked for proof. He made his own proof. Himmler was also the boss over the Einsatz group. That was a secret type of group that was not under the military surveillance or anything. Everything they did was secret. And this is where it becomes really sinister, because they also start putting up annihilation camps. Concentration camps and annihilation camps are not always the same thing. They could be the same thing. These camps were mainly built to kill as many people off as efficiently as possible. It's absolutely horrific. So the camp of Majdanek or Auschwitz, they were an example of annihilation camp and concentration camps in a mix. But then there was complete annihilation camps that was nothing else. For example, Treblinka or Sobibor. They were made to destroy people. And that was what Himmler had on his desk. That was his main task. Let me just tell you, there is no completely accurate number of how many millions of people's blood he has on his hands. I am not 100% sure if there's records of Hitler ever going to concentration camps, but Himmler definitely was there. There are records of him being there and being in contact with the staff members of these different camps. And it is said that one of the ways he found out that he wanted to create more efficient ways of killing people was after he was in Minsk and he watched execution of people, and he got some brain matter on his uniform, and he didn't like that, so he wanted it to be more clean. I have taken absolutely no joy in researching this, but it is important that we talk about it, what kind of person this man is. Now when we know who Himmler is somewhat, let's talk about Allak porcelain. I want to establish something very firmly, and I will show you on my screen. These lanterns were made here. Here's their official website. And if you click around, you will find examples of products they have made, and there is the Julleuchter. There is no going around that it's very clear and proven that these were made by Allak Porcelain Factory. And now, Allak Porcelain, they were a provider of, you guessed it, SS porcelain. So the story of the Julleuchter, it starts with a professor named Hermann Wright, and he sees a peasant art lantern in Sweden in the collection of the Swedish museum that is called Nordiska. It's a Nordic history museum, and they have a collection over 5 million items in it. This is one lantern. This is not particularly outstanding for peasant art. There is a lot of shapes and themes that reoccur within peasant art again and again. This single clay lantern, it doesn't stand out that much. It's pretty, don't get me wrong. There's also a replica placed at the Swedish Open Air Museum, Skansen, and it was placed there in one of the cabins to show how peasants back in the day used to live. And at least it was there in the 1930s when Hermann went to Sweden to do his decor inspiration trip. And the lantern in Nordiska's collection, it originates from Halland, Halland County in Sweden. It is made during the 1700s to the 1800s, and it has no provenience. Provenience means that it has no history tied to it. It's just a lantern, it's just peasant art. There's nothing that ties it to a place in history, really, outside of it might have been made during the 1700s or probably the 1800s. It is also not ancient, and it is probably most certainly not pagan. It is made in a Christian society. It is made in modern times. It is not made in ancient times. And there's nothing making it traditional either, because it's just a peasant art lantern. It's one design. It's one lantern that was made once. That is not a tradition. And it has no provenience to be a traditional item outside of that it was made during the 1800s or 1700s. It's not pagan, it's not traditional, and it's not ancient. It's pretty, but it's none of these things. In 1934, Wirth and Himmler had a meeting where Himmler got told about these lanterns and the design of them, and with Himmler having his weird obsession with the occult and neo-paganism and Scandinavian things overall, he wanted to give these lanterns a story, a history. He wanted to make them traditional. and ancient. Since there wasn't any provenience to the original lantern, he could just make up whatever he wanted to. They even went so far that they copyrighted these lanterns, so they exclusively would be used within the SS. And Himmler is kind of known for making stories up about something and redesigning and giving it a story that would fit his worldview and his occult beliefs, or his, you know, his things. Like, he took something and he made them his. Another example of this is the Sonnenrand, known as the Black Sun. And the Sonnenrand is based upon the archaeological find of Sierscheiben, which is an ornament disc. And this is just another example of something that Himmler, took, remixed, made his own, and made up a story about it. And now people think that that is also pagan for whatever reason. So this peasant art lantern from Sweden is the perfect object because it lacks history. In Himmler's world, these turn into a traditional lamp made by the forefathers. No one was really bothered by him making up the origin history of this lantern. And the story that he made up, it is this pagan story that is applied on this lantern, this specific type of lantern, which is also the story, Himmler's story, is what these modern pagan stores are selling. They're selling the lantern with Himmler's interpretation and story. My humble opinion, I find that absolutely disgusting. I find it disgusting. But after Himmler got his hands on this design that he copyrighted for the SS and for the soldiers of the Third Reich, it became his pagan, traditional, ancient lamp. So and also the professor Hermann Wirth, he was just not any professor that randomly stumbled upon Nordiska Museum in Sweden. No, he was the president of the club Deutsches Annenerbe, where Himmler was the chairman. This club's mission was to promote the science with the natives' history's spirit. So already in 1936, these boys, they worked quickly. They had the copyright and the design all done with the Julleuchter. And the intended use of their lantern are to be used in celebrations such as the turn of the year, which is what the modern pagan stores also use as their terminology of choice for whatever reason. They were given to the SS leaders at first, but eventually more members of the SS could get their hands on them. And with the lantern came also instructions made by Heinrich Himmler himself, like how to use it. That on the day of the winter solstice, at the Yule celebration takes place, and then a Julleuchter was put in front of the unit leader, and that the candle was lit in the beginning of the evening. And during the evening, more and more members would get their Julleuchter. There's a quote by Fritz Weitzel I want to read to you guys about these lanterns. Because this is the will of the Reichsführer SS to all of his men, I give you this Julleuchter. It is reproduced after an old piece from the early past of our people. Its light should burn in the night of the turn of the year, which after our present tradition is the night of the 31st of December to the 1st of January. The small candle that is inside the candle holder may burn as symbol of the last hour of the past year. The large light may flare up the first moment when the new year starts awakening. There is a deep wisdom in the old tradition. Might each SS man see extinguish the small flame of the old year with pure clean heart and ignite the flame of the new year's light with raised will. This I wish you and your clan today into all future. It is said that the decoration on it is to illustrate the year's wheel and the sacred tradition of Yule. The SS claimed that this lantern was reproduced, the Julleuchter is reproduced after an old piece from our early past, from our people handed down to us. Which is a lie. It was made in Sweden 1 or 2 generations ago. So even within the SS, these ancient lies, they are spread And it's important to understand that outside of the SS, outside of the Nazis, Julleuchter was not available, and its application is virtually unknown. And I will talk a little bit more about the language use, how close the language use in these modern pagan stores is to the actual Nazis' description and language of these Julleuchter, and how close the language is to Himmler's, since he is the inventor of this whole pagan tradition. So to get back to the trail of talking about Allach porcelain, there is a market out there for authentic slave labor porcelain. It's mainly being sold in America and Russia. And this is for people who sell, they trade, they buy this type of historical porcelain that has been made during very poor circumstances. Some collectors, they take very big pride in that they personally own Himmler's own porcelain chess set. I personally do not understand this fascination, I do not share it, but there are these enthusiasts out there, and that's that. Allach porcelain is described as following. The unique circumstances that prevailed in Germany made it possible for the very best artists, designers, potters, and all persons associated with the manufacture of fine porcelain to be taken from the many world-famous factories that existed in Germany at that time, such as Dresden, Berlin, Rosenthal, etc., and employed at the previously unknown factory at Allach. It was this unique concentration of talent made available for its production that enabled Allach porcelain to be of such high quality and consequentially high desirable, and then it just goes on. Concentration of talent. Allach porcelain factory was run and operated by the SS, and the workers there were slaves from the Dachau concentration camp. So concentration of talent is a very, very interesting expression to use in this circumstance. Allach porcelain that produced the Julleuchter, together with Himmler's little story about them, were made by concentration camp slaves and prisoners. The specific concentration camp that was tied to Allach's production was Dachau, and Dachau had around 140 sub-camps that they put around so that the prisoners would be closer to the factories. And there was even a sub-camp that was named Allach. And it is said that Allach factory was one of Himmler's favorite projects. So therefore this factory made porcelain goods that fell in line with Himmler's view and interest in Nordic and Germanic different type of things. They also produced other products there, not only the Julleuchter. Production of Allach porcelain ended in 1945 when the war ended. So let's talk a little bit more about my least favorite topic of all when it comes to these things. Dachau concentration camp. What was that? What is that all about? Dachau was the longest open concentration camp. It was set up in 1933 and it was open till the point that the prisoners there became freed. There is over 41,000 people that has been confirmed to have been murdered in this camp, together with the sub-camps of Dachau. But we will probably never get the correct number, because at Dachau there was also crematoriums. Concentration camps were places where women, men and children were taken. And Dachau was the model, it was the standard that was later set for all of the other camps that was set up after 1933. And this is also one of the camps you can still visit today. So who were locked up at these camps? Besides that they were women, men and children. They were the enemy of the Nazis. Political prisoners, it was people from Poland, it was Romani, it was Jews, it was homosexuals, it was Jehovah's Witnesses, it was Catholic priests, it was communists, and it was handicapped people. Anyone who wasn't desirable by the people in power, basically, was the people who ended up in these camps. Dachau is one of those really horrific examples as well, because at Dachau there was also human experiments going on. In Dachau they also started with the very famous sign, Arbeit macht frei, which means work yourself free, basically. This sign was also used at, for example, Auschwitz, together with other camps that was created after Dachau. As I've already talked about, it had crematoriums, it had gas chambers with the signs that said shower, bath over them. There was a shooting field where prisoners could be executed as well. And Dachau is basically what you would expect of such a place. It is made out of what nightmares are made out of. There are records about guards, how they have thrown prisoners' caps in the no-go zones of this camp, so that the prisoners would go there, so that the guard up in the tower could shoot them. And there's so many horrendous stories, there's so much horrendousness that has been recorded about the camp of Dachau. I will not go into that part, I cannot stomach it. It's too much for me, quite frankly. And the humans experiments that was conducted there by the SS doctor Sigmund Rascher, he personally wrote to Himmler about his experiments, what he was doing, how he was going, and so on. So Himmler was also very involved in these human experiments, which also gives you more of who Himmler was as a person. These experiments I will not talk further on. They are so horrendous that I do not wish to talk about them. I wish I'd never read about them. I think it's important to read about these things and research these things, and everyone should. If you have a personal interest in looking further into these things, I think it's a good thing and it gives you perspective. But why I'm talking about it is that these were the people who made these lanterns. We have Himmler, we have Himmler's story about the lamp, this ancient pagan story, Wheel of the Year and all of that stuff. And then we have the actual people who made these lanterns. The people at Dachau were the people that made the lanterns as well. These were the conditions that they were under when they made these lanterns. Just for the SS officers to have their pretty Yule fest with their made-up story about an ancient past that never was. These are people who were systematically murdered, experimented on, SA'd, all type of nightmare stuff. It's absolutely... They were treated in the most hideous and appalling way a human can be treated. And they made these lanterns in order that some psychopath wanted to play ancient religion. A Julleuchter is an item that is copyrighted by the SS during the Second World War, 1930s, 1940s, whose leader Heinrich Himmler made up a story about how they were ancient and how they were used to celebrate solstice and Yule. It is made and based upon an anonymous peasant art lamp that there is a quantity of 1 or 2 if you count the one at the Open Air Museum as well. They were made in Sweden during the 1700s or 1800s. They hold no connection to paganism, to Yule, to tradition, and ancient past, anything. This tradition around Yule, turning of the Wheel of the Year, ancient past, pagan, that is made up by Himmler. There is no other source for this tradition than Himmler and the SS. Outside of the SS, Himmler and the Nazis, there is no connection of tradition or celebrations in connection to these lanterns. It does not exist. Why I feel it's so important to talk about is because you're being lied to. These store owners, they are lying to you. So let's go back to the words that I talked about in the beginning of the video. Pagan, tradition, ancient. And these are buzzwords that these sellers are using, and it's not true. It is simply factually not true. It is made up. Even the original prototype that Himmler based his own design on is not pagan, ancient or traditional. The one lantern in Sweden, it has no provenance, it has no history, there's nothing tied to it, besides that it looks pretty. The whole myth about these lanterns, and them even being named Julleuchter or Yule lanterns, that comes straight from the Nazis. And that is why it's so important that people are informed about what is ancient, what is not, what is historical and what is not, and which history are we spreading? And is it really okay for modern pagan stores to claim that this is some ancient Scandinavian tradition, or you should use this for your Old Norse practices, when there's literally no other history tied to these lanterns than the ones made up by the Nazis during the Second World War? And that raises a question, can history like this be turned into a positive pagan tradition? In my opinion, no. I don't understand why you would want to claim anything that was invented and made and used during such awful conditions, not even 100 years ago. You have 500 billion other ways to express your paganism, to express the new year, to express gratitude, your Norse belief, whatever it is that you want to express. There are so many other ways. And this is not it. I do not understand, because this is not even an item that you can, so to say, reclaim. This is made by the Nazis. It has no other history. And I don't understand why you would want your beliefs or traditions to be built upon a lie from someone who does not have the decency to tell you the truth. The sellers of these lamps, it's absolutely awful how they're treating their customers. It is tied to so much suffering and horrendousness and nightmare fuel, and I don't know why you would want to use that. I don't know why you would be set on using that particular design with that particular story to express anything, and who would want to taint their own beliefs like that on this sort of an object. If these pagan stores would have displayed in the description of this item what they actually were, would you still have bought this as a cute Christmas item? Additionally, I also want to encourage everyone watching this video to go to the Nieuwengammes Memorial Instagram, where they have also covered these Julleuchter and their history. There is some available in English. I will have a link below to their page. And with that, I would thank you all for listening. And yeah, be careful out there. Not everything is as it seems to be.